Yay. Okay, there we are. It says live. Okay. The good thing about the 11 o'clock one, I was doing the Facebook broadcast at 8 o'clock for a long time, but by doing this for the 11 o'clock, I don't have to go home and load it from my phone to my computer and load it from my computer up onto the page. It goes directly there. So it takes a few minutes to get started, but I think it's better. And I guess for those of you who haven't been here a while, Alan at Keams Canyon, they have a Bible study there. And so sometimes when they're using our Sunday school lesson to help with the adults to have a regular Sunday school lesson for them. And so by doing it in this format, it presents better for a group, that's not live. So, yay! If anything ever happens to this note, I am sunk. Well, I'm glad you're here this morning. We'd like to read a little bit out of our out of David Jeremiah's book, the Prophecy Answer book. They showed the little preview this morning of one of his new he has a new book coming out, but it's was supposed to come out in October. Then they said November, and now they're saying December. So anyway, it's coming out soon. If he doesn't get it out very soon, then we're not going to be able to see it because we'll all be gone. We'll all be raptured. I don't know, there's the hope. You can hope that'll be the case. So here's out of his book on page 104 is what are some of the characteristics of the Antichrist? It says the prophet Daniel describes the Antichrist in these graphic terms in Daniel 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, and there were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High. Because that could be almost any politician right now, right? As Daniel says, the coming world leader will be renowned for this kind of eloquence, which will capture the attention and admiration of the world. Daniel goes on to tell us that not only will this golden-tongued orator speak in high-blown terms, but he will also utter pompous words against the Most High. The Apostle John describes him in a similar fashion in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 13:5, and he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. Daniel continues his description of the Antichrist by telling us he is a man whose appearance was greater than his fellows. That's in Daniel 7:20. In terms of his outward appearance, this man will be a strikingly attractive person. The combination of magnetic personality, speaking ability, and extreme good looks will make him virtually irresistible to the masses. When he comes on the scene, people will flock to him like flies to honey. They will fall all over themselves to do anything he asks. The Apostle John expands on Daniel's description of the Antichrist's blasphemous acts by telling us that every living person will be required to worship this man. This is in Revelation 13:15. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Finally, in Revelation 13:1-8, says the Antichrist is represented as a beast, an appropriate title for him. During the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, the Antichrist will personify Satan himself. 2 Thessalonians 2:9 says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders. Step by step, the Antichrist will promote himself from a European leader to a world leader, to a tyrannical global dictator, and finally to a god. Oh boy. So if you haven't been in our class very long, we've decided that we are pre-trib, which means we're all for pre-trib. But it could be mid-trib, and most of us don't think there's the third one. We really think it's going to be pre-trib or mid-trib. Most of us are voting for pre-trib.
I wonder why.
Pardon?
I said I wonder why.
I know. When you read stuff like that, you're going, oh, I hope we're pre-trib. Yeah, I don't want to see it happen. It's interesting, though, when you see different world leaders, and you think, oh, now is that, you listen to what they say, and you think, okay, is this the one that's coming up? Because we're getting close right now.
I read or listened to the book on the End Times. I can't
Oh, The Tipping Point.
yes,
But, yeah.
The Tipping Point, and it was heavy. It was not like bad heavy, but just like whoa, this
Yes.
makes perfect sense. So if anybody gets a chance to listen to it or read it, it put things in perspective.
Did you listen or read?
I listened.
Listened. Yeah, Jimmy Evans has a book out called The Tipping Point. I think he put it out in 2020. I think is when he did. But
I was, cause I turn it on, you know, when I get in the shower, and I was in the shower and I didn't realize I'd listened to the whole book, and he like ended halfway between my shower. And I'm like, oh, I wanna know more.
yeah.
Wait a minute.
And I found I like to go back and listen to a certain section because parts of it I know and parts I don't know, and I can pick up on more of it as I kind of understand it better. Yeah, it's a good one. If you want one that's a good one, that seems like a pretty good one. And it's in the library also, if you'd like to check it out at the library. Okay, so another book I've been looking at is called Unearthing the Bible. It's archaeological evidences. And the reason we do a little excerpt from this is because a lot of times we get the feeling that these are just good old stories from the old days. And we're just reading these good stories with good lessons when we read the scripture. But I want to begin to give you the archaeological evidence to show that these are not just stories. These were real people in real places and real things that happened. On page 82 of this one, it's the 31st entry. The thing that I thought was really surprising in here is how they can tell where the Israelites lived compared to the Canaanites. Where did they live when they were in Canaan? And how do they know that it was Jewish people? By digging in the dirt, how do you know that Jewish people were there? I thought this was very interesting. They found these jars, they're called collared rim jars. And they're jars that are shaped like this that have this specific collared rim. And that's something that was common among the Israelite people and not among the Canaanite people. But they said here, when the Israelites settled in Canaan, their towns and cities came to be characterized by several features that are discernible in archaeology. So this is what archaeologists look for, including 4-room houses, a lack of pig bones, no temples or idols, simple pit burials, circular settlement layouts, storage pits, and a distinctive type of pottery called a collared rim jar. I just thought that was interesting. It goes on and tells all the geological stuff, but archaeological stuff. This particular one points out Judges 18:27 as an example of where you would find these collared rim jars. But anyway, so I think that's kind of interesting to know what they look for. What are they going to look for to find your house?
Grandkids' pictures.
TV, they're going to find TV remotes, right? They're going to go, what is this room for? They seem to like to stare at walls, stare at boxes. Yeah, I know. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. We are in 2 Samuel. We're going to go from 15 to 19, which is a long section for us, but we did it pretty quick at the earlier group, so I think we have enough time, but it is a lot of scripture we're going through. And last week, just to remind you of where we were last week, we saw the consequences of David's sin. Do you remember that? He continues to have consequences from the sins that he committed with Bathsheba and Uriah and others. David's eldest son and heir to the throne, Amnon, raped his half-sister Tamar. Who was the brother for Tamar was Absalom. So that put Amnon and Absalom then are enemies because of this issue. And Absalom was just livid. He simmered for 2 years, and David did nothing to punish Amnon. Now, why isn't David punishing Amnon? Don't answer. We don't know. Think about that. Why didn't he act? Why didn't he do something to punish Amnon for raping the sister? Well, keep that in mind.
He kind of did that.
He had a guilty.
Part what, Marvin?
He did something similar.
Feeling guilty about sins that have already been forgiven. It's a good thing we don't do that, Marvin, right? We don't
Indeed, yeah.
We don't commit sins and then feel guilty to enforce the consequence to other people who've committed those same sins.
It's kind of typical human, yeah.
Yes, it does. So Absalom murdered Geshur for protection by his maternal grandfather, Thalami, king of Geshur. So David grieved for Ammon, but Absalom. But what did he do about it? He knew Amnon was not good, but Absalom was the remaining hope for an heir, and David loved Absalom. Ultimately, Absalom returned to Jerusalem and to the royal court, but his anger toward his father grew. So even when Absalom returned, though, did David go see him? Remember, we read that last week. He didn't make contact with him. He just allowed him to come back to the city. So remember Nathan's prophecy against David? It was in 10 and 12. It says, the sword will never depart from your house, because you have despised the Lord and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, I will bring evil upon you out of your own house, will take your wives before your very eyes and will give them to your neighbor. You will lie with your wives in broad daylight. You have acted in secret, but I will do this in the presence of all Israel. In all Israel, let's see, where am I at? Well, that's it. In the presence of the sun itself. So he's going to see these things happen in everybody's presence. It won't be a secret. As the story of David devolved into a tale of betrayal, adultery, and murder, so the consequences of David's sin follow the same pattern. Absalom betrays his king and father. Absalom has sex with his father's concubines in public view, dramatically and graphically taking possession of David's wives, and Absalom commands his men to hunt down David and kill him. That's what we're going to be seeing in this next section. And in the manner of a stepped-up parallelism, Absalom's sin is a restatement of David's sin, greatly magnified. God is not punishing David for his sin. God forgave David. Absalom's actions are the brutal consequence of David's sin, played out in his own home and family, like father, like son. So it's not that God did him the sin. It's just this is the way sin works. Sin creates problems throughout the generations. And we're going to be seeing what David's reaction is to this. And then we're going to talk about in the end, I'm going to say, what should we do? Looking at what happens with David. Is he the example of what we should do or the example of what we should not do? And then the question is, what should we do when we see the consequences of sin that we know we're forgiven for, but we see them happening in our lives? So we'll take a look at what happens to David. Samuel 15, 1 through 6. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses and with 50 men to run ahead of him. Oh, doesn't that look sharp? He's got himself a chariot, horses, and 50 men to run in front of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there's no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice. And so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Can you see how he's doing that?
Master manipulator.
Yeah, if I was in charge, I'd make sure and take care of this for you. Too bad you got to deal with David.
Out on the campaign trail.
Politician.
Politics. Verse 7, at the end of 4 years.
40.
4.
It says 4.
Mine says 40.
Mine says 40.
Oh.
It says 4 in my book.
Verse 7, mine says 4.
Mine says 4.
4.
There's a footnote somewhere.
The King James says 40.
Already.
Because he's only been I don't think he's that old yet.
Yeah, the footnote says some Septuagint manuscripts, Syriac and Josephus Hebrew says 40.
Yeah, he's not that old to have 40 years of doing this. I think 4 is more realistic. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron." The king said to him, "Go in peace." So he went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, 'Absalom is king in Hebron.' 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. So you can kind of see what he's trying to do. Absalom is trying to, he'd be a traitor. After 4 years, he's going to try to take the throne from David.
Staging a coup.
Yeah, and it's been 11 years since Amnon raped Tamar. It's been 9 years since Absalom murdered Amnon. And so now, during this time, Absalom has just gotten more and more hatred and resentful toward to his father David. Now, has David been good friends with him? Pulled him into the family. They had little dinners together at the house. Nope, nothing. No contact. Here's a map showing where Jerusalem is and where Hebron is. Remember, Hebron was where David had first gone when he first came into the land. So it's the old town, but he's established Jerusalem as the capital town. And so you can see the locations there. They're very close. David had spent 7 years as king in Hebron, and then when Absalom was born there, Absalom was born in Hebron to David's third wife, Maacah. So this is like for Absalom, this is going to his hometown. Feigning gratitude to his restatement of court, Absalom asked David permission to go to Hebron to offer sacrifices of thanksgiving. Hebron is Absalom's hometown, but more importantly, he seems to have been cultivating support there within the tribe of Judah. To cover his real motive, Absalom invites an additional 200 men to attend the festivities. Those men know nothing about Absalom's conspiracy to overthrow David and to usurp the throne. That's what it appears from what we see now. Also, Absalom invites Ahithophel, which is David's senior political advisor. So that's really on the inside of the throne or the kingdom. Verse 13. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom." Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword." The king's officials answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses." Wait a minute, is this like David to just go away? The king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at the edge of the city. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. So Absalom is David's eldest surviving son. He's a young man, he's very much like David, and David loves him. After 11 years of intensely strained relationship, and after avoiding confrontation, Absalom has developed this contempt for his father and is doing this political maneuvering. And David knows that if he defends himself against Absalom, what will be the option? What will he have to do? Kill him. David does not want to be in the battle. He does not want to kill his son Absalom. And
Wait, you said the only surviving son.
The oldest.
Oh, the eldest surviving son, okay. Okay.
verse 18.
I misheard you, yeah.
Verse 18, all his men marched past him, along with the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. So those people are people from the old days who had fought with him when he was working for Gath and outlaw days. Those are the people who have been with him longer than he's been king. The king said to Ittai, the Gittite, "Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner and an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us when I do not know where I am going? Go back and take your people with you. May the Lord show you kindness and faithfulness." But Ittai replied to the king, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will be your servant." So they're fiercely loyal. This man is very loyal. David said to Ittai, "Go ahead and march on." So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept out loud as all the people passed by. Why? Why are they weeping that the king is passing by?
Because they're losing, because he's retreating.
He's retreating. He's giving up on them. He's leaving them for Absalom to come in, right? The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved toward the wilderness. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the ark of the covenant of God. They set down the ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Take the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it in his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him." Now remember, the ark is like saying who God is with. You have the Ark of the Covenant, that's the presence of God. Do you remember the old days when David would always go and ask the priest to ask God questions? When's the last time we saw that? It's been a while. It's been a while since we've seen David go. When the baby was dying, we saw that when the 7 days before the baby that Bathsheba bore died, he prayed, and then he cleaned himself and came up out of there.
Victory, so
It was a symbol that the presence of God was with you, because not only was it the ark with the priests carrying and all that, but there's the pillar of cloud and smoke that goes above it. And so that whole thing was like saying God is with you. So when he sends that back, that's a bad sign.
things are going south.
Well, not only he has it, the ark with him, the priests are with him, but he sends it back. So it's not only that like God left him, but he pushed God back over there. You know, yeah, because he sent them back. You know, so it's almost worse than that. Yeah. Verse 27. The king also said to Zadok the priest, "Do you understand? Go back to the city with my blessing. Take your son Ahimaaz with you, and also Abiathar's son Jonathan. You and Abiathar return with your 2 sons. I will wait at the fords in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me." So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads too and were weeping as they went up. Now David had been told Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, "Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness." So Ahithophel had been his big political advisor, and now he's listed in 2 Samuel as the father of Eliam. So he was the grandfather of Bathsheba. Do you see the connection there?
Ahithophel, or however you pronounce it, is the grandfather of Bathsheba.
And so David learns that Ahithophel has joined the conspirators, so David knows he's in serious trouble. Verse 32, when David arrived at the summit where people used to worship God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, "If you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to this city and say to Absalom, 'Your Majesty, I will be your servant. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant,' then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Won't the priests Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with anything you hear." So in other words, he has some people there that he trusts, and so he's trying to get the message back and forth. So Hushai, David's confidant, arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was in. When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, wait a minute, did we talk about Mephibosheth?
No.
Okay, before we do that, at the top of Mount Olives, David met Ziba. Ziba was Saul's servant and the one who went to find Mephibosheth. Remember when King David asked, "Is there anyone remaining of Saul's?" That was Ziba who went and found Mephibosheth. So David adopted Mephibosheth as one of his own sons and moved him into the palace. And so that made Ziba and his sons Mephibosheth's servants. So there's kind of an interesting little connection happening here. There's a bunch of sneaky stuff going on. When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. The king asked Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the wilderness." The king then asked, "Where is your master's grandson?" Ziba said to him, "He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks, quote, 'Today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom.'" Ooh, do you see what's happening there?
It's gonna be in for a surprise.
He's trying to take advantage of this opportunity. But what about Ziba? He's the grandfather, is it? Yeah, he's the grandfather. What's he doing? He's supplying David. Oh, the twists and turns. Then the king said to Ziba, "All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." "I humbly bow," Ziba said. "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king." So it looks like Mephibosheth is betraying David, but Ziba, his own grandfather's taking care of David. I know. Verse 5, as David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family, came out from there. His name was Shimea, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimea said, get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord is giving the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." But the king said, "What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, 'Curse David,' who can ask, 'Why do you do this?'" David then said to Abishai and all his officials, "My son, my own flesh and blood is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamite? Leave him alone, let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today." So David and his men continued along the road, while Shimea was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself.
Okay.
So what's happening on the inside of David? What happened to God's warrior? Who is he now? He feels like he deserves everything he's getting.
Yeah, even though he's being unfairly accused, he didn't actually shed any blood out of the house of Saul. And he's being accused of that.
There's all kinds of accusations, but he's not really defending himself either,
No.
is he? Why? Why isn't he?
He feels
He
guilty
feels he
for what
deserves
did
it.
do.
He's not worthy anymore.
He's lost his confidence.
Yep. Yep, it's a sad thing. So, meanwhile, back in the Jerusalem, Absalom and all the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. Then Hushai the Archite, David's confidant, went to Absalom and said to him, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Absalom said to Hushai, "So this is the love you show your friend? If he's your friend, why don't you go with him?" Hushai said to Absalom, "No, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people, and by all the men of Israel, his I will be, and I will remain with him. Furthermore, whom shall I serve? Should I not serve the son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you." Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give us your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel answered, "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom you left to take care of at the palace."
There you go.
Somebody slap him. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now in those days, the advice Ahithophel gave was like that of one